Greetings, race community. Brent coming in live with a unique episode today. I am hosting Dan Peterson, who currently serves as Vice President for Development at the University of Washington and just wrapped up service as the President at the University of Washington Foundation. And Dan is about 10 days from wrapping up at the University of Washington. And so I just wanted to welcome Dan here and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brent. Great to be with you. Great to see you.
As a side hustle, Dan shared that he is a grandfather to Addison, who had a 4th birthday today. And so I just wanted to make sure that Addison got that shout out as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Dan, I have this really poignant memory, in the before times before the pandemic when we were logging travel, at a level that at least I haven't seen return just yet. I was at a conference and I believe it was in Seattle and I can't remember which one it was. And I was trying to figure it out through my emails and I couldn't, but I have this poignant memory of you listening to a presentation that I gave and sitting in like the front row and being very engaged. And I don't know what the presentation was about, but I don't have that many like poignant memories of the first time that I can really remember seeing somebody out there in the circuit, but I have that with you. So it's great to kind of come full circle and reconnect in this environment. And as I've been asking, many of my guests on the Raise podcast to just reflect on your own higher education journey. Think back to Dan, junior year of high school. Who was that guy and what led him to Washington State University?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer, what led me to Washington State, it was 300 miles away from my parents. So particularly, I didn't have to worry about my father showing up on my doorstep on a Friday night. I could go have a real college experience. And, back in the day, in the late 1970s, not many parents took kids to college tours around the country. And I'm a state of Washington kid, so I applied at UW, I applied at WSU, was accepted to both and really made the decision to go to Pullman just to have a little separation and to have a true college experience. Back then, the UW did not offer a lot of on-campus residential student living. It was more of a commuter campus back then. It's much different today. So WSU was across the mountains and in the farthest corner of the state. And it just, felt like a good thing to do.
Just to set a little bit of context for folks, 3 of the top 10 songs that year were by the Bee Gees. So that was a pretty big moment for the Bee Gees, right?
If you say so.
Yeah, they're telling me Night Fever, Staying Alive, and How Deep Is Your Love. So,
I think I was a little more into the Boston scene then. So
fair enough.
Boston, little Kansas. For your Midwest background, REO Speedwagon.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so, getting 300 miles from home, what was the experience at Washington State? Did you kind of hit the ground running right away? Was it a tough adjustment? I mean, what was did you know that you loved higher education when you were experiencing it?
Well, I actually stayed out of school a year and I worked in the retail grocery business. And it was a great experience. I think I wasn't ready to go to college. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So working hard for a year was great. I saw in that experience people that were 20, 30-year veterans of that industry. And I knew what they made because the company I worked for was very transparent in posting your weekly salary. So I knew what the store manager was making. And I just felt like, I could have done that, but I was materialistic enough to realize that isn't going to cut it. And that helped me when I went back to college. I was committed then to get there, take advantage of it. And then I fell back into some things I did in high school where I was really involved in student government. And I became involved in student government at WSU, served on the student senate. My senior year was the associated student vice president. And that's what led me to advancement, because while I was an WSU officer, Connie Kravis would invite officers of the student body to the WSU Foundation meetings. Connie was then the president of WSU Foundation. And so I got some exposure to development that way. And then I had the good fortune to serve on the search committee that year that hired the WSU's first, what we would call today, vice president for advancement. So WSU decided in 1981 to build an integrated advancement program. And they hired a gentleman by the name of Stanton Schmid, who was actually would be a great person for you to have on your Ray's cast at some point, Brent. But Stan was the deputy advancement leader at the University of Washington. So this 2-degree Husky who had worked 15 years at his alma mater was hired by WSU to come across the state and build an advancement team, integrated advancement team at Washington State University. Served on the search committee, had a beer with him on his first day in the office. And he just said, hey, let's stay in touch. Let's stay connected. And a year later, I called him to do a summer internship. And here we are almost 40 years later.
Well, I got to give a shout out to my colleague, Kevin Massimino, who was a proud Coug and also served as ASWSU vice president. So I don't know if you've made that connection, but that's in fact, and I will encourage Kevin to at least reach out and say hello.
I like that.
This goes live. And I do just want to touch on one kind of unique twist in your resume relative to many guests is you did attend law school, which in a certain regard, as I learn more and more about advancement and especially complicated gifts and structuring and so forth, it's almost surprising that more folks don't consider that, or at least some sort of supplemental legal education. But I've also heard from a lot of folks that, go to law school if you want to be a lawyer. So did you want to be a lawyer?
Well, I graduated from WSU with a history degree, and I thought I wanted to do I thought I wanted to do high school teaching, and I realized that wasn't it. So, with a history degree, and I had an interest in law, so I thought, I'll go give that a shot, thinking, yes, I wanted to be an attorney. By the end of the first year, I did not want to be an attorney. I knew that. And that's really what led me to call Stan for the internship. One of our law professors really gave us a gift when he told the group, hey, you're all stressed out. It's the end of the first year. Go do anything but law this year. Anything that you can do this summer. Be a lifeguard at the state park, he said. Never forget it.
Be a lifeguard at the state park?
Yeah, so a real gift. And because he said that next summer, after your second year, you've got to do something law related to get yourself ready to get, to do the job hunt. So I knew I had to be in Eastern Washington a good chunk of that summer. And so I called Stan. I said, hey, would like to do it. He said, I've got an internship for you. I did that full time. And at the end of the summer, he said, you can do this work. You would be good in this. I will hire you, but you have to finish law school. And I'm like, what? I mean, I would have taken a job right then. But Stan also had his law degree, and he saw what that law degree, to your point, Brent, your setup here, he saw what that law degree meant for his own career growth and development. So I went back to law school, but I went back knowing I was going to go into advancement, and it made law school much more enjoyable because I focused on the things that I wanted to take advantage of. So I took a lot of tax, I took a lot of estate planning, wills and trusts. I mean, you can see from my resume, I've spent a lot of time in the plan giving area. So law school helped immensely there. But I think also the advocacy skills that you build in law school, both oral and written advocacy was helpful. And then just the whole problem solving. how you look at a set of facts, you identify the issue, you analyze possible solutions, um, and build plans going forward. So yeah, I
So you
you
kind of, you had that clarity in law school, which I'm sure in a certain regard probably reduced the pressure and allowed you to, again, explore and focus more on what did you want to learn as opposed to, how do I scratch and claw my way to the most white shoe firm, of my classmates, which is just a part of that competitive dynamic. But then you went and did something that very, very few people have ever done, which is spend 20 years working on behalf of your alma mater
yeah.
uh, continuously in an advancement leadership role and in a sector where, oftentimes folks have to move their lives and their families to advance their career, which you've done as well. I just have to ask, what kept you in that at Washington State for an almost unparalleled number of years?
Well, I think one of the benefits of large public institutions and the advancement programs that they have is that the advancement program is also fairly large, and it allows you to almost port from job to job or maybe even career to career inside of that institution without having to necessarily move. Yes, I was at WSU for 20 years, but I had almost four fundamentally different roles. I think of it almost as career stops. About every 4 or 5 years, I was kind of lifted and moved into something, pretty different. So I never felt like I needed to go look at other institutions until I reached a point where philosophically, the leader of the WSU Foundation and I, the then leader, just looked at each other and said, "We don't see eye to eye on how to do this work." That's fine. He's the leader. The university leadership has tapped him, and so I said to him, give me 6 months, and I'll be out of here, and that's what led me to actively look. I was in about 4 or 5 searches at one time, and ultimately led me to the University of Washington School of Medicine advancement team, and then from there, Oregon State, Illinois, and then back to Washington.
Can I just ask, during those 21 years, I mean, it had to be, working on behalf of your alma mater, selling a mission that you had personally benefited from. That's pretty special. Any favorite memories, favorite donor experiences, or gifts that were closed that you'd be open to sharing?
Well, I think can I do three?
You bet you can.
Okay. One would be the volunteer who was on my first search committee, Wayne Walther, first search committee when I was hired as a young athletic fundraiser, and I was going to go up to Spokane and raise money for Cougar Athletics up there. Wayne, the education, the gift that Wayne gave me was understanding. You'll appreciate this as a marketing professional, Brent. He said, understand that there are 3 different sectors of Cougs in Spokane that you're going to have to connect with. There's the old guard with all the money, the middle guard, emerging professionals, and then what he called the young bucks. And he told me that as we were driving from Pullman to Spokane, after we had completed the interview process and I had the job and all of that. But I'll never forget that. I mean, it was that, a volunteer pulling me aside and essentially telling me how to succeed in that marketplace, was really helpful. The second would be a volunteer, Doug Grimm, who was the longtime chair of our Portland Plan Giving Advisory Board, and where we brought together a group of allied professionals, and we'd come in once a month with one of the plan gifts that we were working on that was particularly tricky or complicated. And Doug was just such a great convener. He had such great presence and respect in the Portland community. He attracted top quality allied professionals to be part of this. And he was one of these people that was like being in law school in the Socratic method, where the questions that he asked. And so what it made you do was want to always bring your A game. You never wanted to come to that plan giving advisory board meeting and think you could just show up and wing it with Doug and that group. So I really appreciated that level of professionalism that he inspired. And then from a donor standpoint, probably at WSU has to be Phil and June Leidy. When I was there, they were by far, by a magnitude of tenfold, the largest donors to student scholarships and student programs at WSU. Phil was a Bay Area kid who came to WSU to originally study veterinary medicine. He graduated in 1941 in business. He almost didn't graduate because he told his fraternity advisor he was going to be $50 short. He did not have $50 to cover his last semester's tuition. He was a houseboy in a sorority, so he had his room and board kind of covered. And the fraternity advisor, a guy named Joe Caraher, who then was the Alumni Magazine editor, right? All roads lead to advancement. Joe said, Phil, I'll loan you the $50. Come back, make sure you finish. You can pay me back at some point in time. More importantly, you could probably just pay it forward to somebody else. Joe told Phil that. And so Phil never forgot that, was a founding partner of Dean Witter, did really well in the financial services industry in the Bay Area, and never forgot his alma mater, never forgot his student experience. So, worked with him on a lot of gifts, on big, complicated gifts. But you never, when you went and saw Phil and June in Burlingame, you never got to a conversation about giving until you went through the 4 years of WSU scrapbooks that Phil had from his student days at WSU.
I love that. What a poignant memory. And do you think that they would have been equally philanthropic if it weren't for that taste of philanthropy that Joe offered them?
It's a great question. They were, I think they would have certainly been involved on the alumni side because Phil was sort of a big man on campus as a student, and you could tell from the scrapbooks was involved in a lot of things. So I think there was a lot of Cougar pride. So I think in our vernacular today, Brent, they would have been engaged alumni and probably over time would have been inspired to think about philanthropy. Somebody like Connie Kravis would have glommed onto them pretty quickly. So yeah, I think they would have got there, but it may have been, their journey might have been a little different.
So it really was that poignant of a memory for him.
Oh,
and that much of a spark for his life. And it just makes you wonder, how might we foster that level of appreciation and support within the existing student population? And it's tough, right? Because, nobody in your seat, and your peers who've been guests on this podcast, are really being hired to set the foundation for 50 years from now. Your job is to raise the money today to solve problems and make an impact today. But it's amazing when you hear so many examples where that one little pay it forward moment just planted a seed of gratitude that grows. And it does make me wonder how to how to balance really stewarding that top 1 or 2% of the giving pyramid while not forgetting that those seeds are being planted today?
I think it's how you define success, Brent. And I think if we define success myopically in terms of dollars in the door today, then I think we'll have done our institution a huge disservice. And I think I'm very worried about our profession overweighting its focus on dollars in the door today, not thinking about the next 20 or 30 years, because I think demographically, socially, the students of the past 10 years, the students of the next 30 years, they're going to look and experience college a lot differently than Phil did. And we have to pay attention to that. We have to be mindful of that. We have to play the long game.
Now, you started at Washington State a few minutes before another guest on this podcast, Mike Goodwin.
I was there. I was a bit before Mike, but we were colleagues. And Mike, I want to give Mike a shout out and because Mike was our first full-time plan giving officer director at WSU. Mike was the person who seeded the largest gifts that Phil and June Leidy made.
Very cool. And a reminder of how tight-knit this sector is, and your paths did cross again, which we'll speak to. But I have to ask, as you, and I appreciate your candor just around why you left Washington State, and without getting into all of those details, that couldn't have been all that easy. And I have to ask what it was like going over to UW and frankly, I don't know, starting, taking that step as a professional fundraiser where it's not just about your alma mater or kind of growing up at the institution, but it's about the business of philanthropy and selling somebody else's mission, even though you maybe didn't know the fight song or didn't have, all of the institutional knowledge that you undoubtedly had, garnered over the years at Washington State. Tell me about that transition to professional fundraiser, if you will.
Yeah. Well, first, I think it was when you're forced to leave the nest, you leave the nest. So the fact that I was feeling that pressure meant that I didn't have the luxury of trying to figure out a way to hang on. This gentleman and I had reached an agreement. So I knew I knew I had to do something. I think actually when I was the different roles I was looking at, the stepping to the University of Washington School of Medicine and the medicine advancement team was actually probably a good first step out of the nest for me, because it didn't require me to embrace a whole institution. I could make maybe a half step towards embracing a significant, let's be clear, significant part of the University of Washington enterprise is UW Medicine. But UW Medicine is about patient care, and it's about disease prevention and disease cure. It's not about Hail Alma Mater. So it helped me, and I think it helped me make that transition. And then a couple of years later, when Mike Goodwin called about the Oregon State opportunity, once I had made that first step, the second and the third step became a bit easier to consider.
And so tell me about getting that call. Was it a difficult decision, or was it a no-brainer to get that band back together?
It was a no-brainer. I learned in the process of working with some great colleagues at Medicine, who I'm going to get together with as I head into retirement and celebrate our time together. I learned that I did not have a passion for academic medicine. I have a passion for helping 18 to 22-year-olds get a good start in life. I have a belief now, strong belief, that American public higher education has been one of the great social equalizing forces in our country. Not perfectly, because it's excluded a lot of participants, a lot of potential participants. Hopefully, we will change that over time moving forward. But the ability to go to Oregon State that had a vibe like WSU, Beavers are every bit as fanatical about their institution as Cougars are. Um, uh, and the ability to work with a quality leader like Mike Goodwin and be part of what Mike was doing in rebuilding the OSU Foundation, that was attractive. That was really attractive. And Mike called me 20 minutes before my wife and I were to meet a realtor in Seattle to go pick the house that we were going to buy. So, if Mike would have called me, a couple of hours later, I don't know, some things might have turned out differently. But
so right before the roots were planted, basically.
Yeah.
And when you reflect on the time in Oregon State, I mean, we've had such a longstanding relationship there. I've got Oregon State stories. I was talking to a fundraiser at a dinner one time, and we were actually just going around the table saying, hey, tell me kind of your, I don't know, craziest or most memorable sort of donor story, fundraising trip. And she specifically had worked with the veterinarian school, and she was talking about how little people appreciate how much philanthropy gets done in barns. And that one time she was helping somebody, she was meeting a prospective donor, and she ended up having to jump in and help deliver a baby cow. And so curious if you had any of those sorts of kind of edge case fundraising trips that you recall or that you've heard of from peers. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the delivering the baby cow. That I can almost imagine who that was. I think I think the ones that I remember were I remember several donors from the College of Agriculture. So going out on the road with Todd Bastian and going down to Southern Oregon to meet with fruit growers down there that were interested in supporting the College of Agriculture there at Oregon State, or over to Eastern Washington. I two that come to mind that are special. One would be a trip to Walla Walla, to the wine country, and to meet with OSU alum Norm McKibbins, who was he was by profession was a civil engineer, was part of the Kiewit group, did very well, and has started 3 wineries, last I knew, 3 wineries in Walla Walla. But he's a proud engineer in the way that he makes wine. And so getting the tour of the Pepper Bridge winery from Norm, having him explain how he makes wine with a totally gravity-fed system, I like red wine. That was pretty fun. And then I think over to Tillamook on the coast of Oregon, the Tillamook Cheese Company, and meeting with one of the founding co-op members of that great company, Bud Ginger, was an outstanding Beaver alumnus. He and his wife, very generous, very committed to helping students from that region get a great Oregon State experience. Bud went to Oregon State for 4-H camp, as I recall, as like a junior high student or an early high school student, and that kind of cemented his relationship. And so, working with folks like that in ways to help support their alma mater, and again, to help young people get that start in life, pretty rewarding.
You give me flashbacks because we did our family RV trip during the pandemic, 10 months on the road, 12,000 miles, 34 states, with the stop in Walla Walla. Got a little taste of wine country. We'd not experienced that before. Nice stop in Yakima, which I didn't totally appreciate. And then we did cruise through Tillamook as well. And so, expanded the horizons for sure. Yeah. I have to ask, after that much time in the Pacific Northwest, I wouldn't have necessarily guessed that the move to the Midwest to the University of Illinois would be in the cards. And I'm just curious, again, was that an easy decision, hard decision, lessons learned?
Well, I said no to them twice. I said no to the University of Illinois twice, and then the chancellor called. And the chancellor at the University of Illinois is a woman named Phyllis Wise, who had been at the University of Washington when I was there. So I knew of her. I did not know her well. She was the provost. But Connie Kravis had called me and said, you know, Dan, she needs a top advancement officer. You can do this job and you will love her. And along the way, I've sort of learned, Brent, that much as Jerry Panis's book said, you know, people make big gifts because they believe in mission and they believe in leadership. I think as you start to look at top level positions and advancement, you should be looking at that same criteria. Belief in mission, belief in leadership. Again, I knew about the University of Illinois through the whole Big Ten kind of ecosystem. So, you know, the mission was appealing. I knew that there had been some instability within the advancement program at the university. So I originally said no. But then I had a 4-hour telephone call with Chancellor Wise, who remains a dear friend today. And I hung up the phone and I looked at my wife and I said, I think we got to go take a look at this one, honey. So that's, you know, that's what brought us to Illinois. And I enjoyed every minute of it. The institution was every bit as vibrant, as impactful as I expected it to be. The team there was, you know, deeply committed to all things Illinois. And the chancellor had an incredible vision for how she wanted to move the institution forward, including the creation of the first engineering-based college of medicine, which was a lot of fun to work with her on. Yeah, it was a great experience, and I loved Big Ten athletics. And my son and I went to Indianapolis this past March for the Big Ten basketball tournament. So there's a part of that that's gonna stick with me. And I, you know, bought my Illinois gear and, you know, rooted for the Illini, except they lost in the second day.
Can you make any broad generalization? I mean, similar kind of positioning in that these are, you know, name brand, top tier public education institutions. So sort of the role that the University of Illinois plays in the Midwest is very similar to the role that Washington or Washington State might play in the Pacific Northwest. Is fundraising the same, or is it different in the Midwest versus the Pacific Northwest?
I think it was largely the same, particularly thinking about it through the alumni lens. I don't think I would say that there were discernible differences. As I've come back to the University of Washington, one of the things that I've realized is, and I think this would be the case if the University of Illinois were located in Chicago, okay, if actually the flagship institution was in Chicago, like Seattle or UW is in Seattle. I think the biggest difference, Brent, is this year, and it's been pretty consistent during my tenure here, 80% of the donors to the University of Washington are non-alumni. I don't believe, I believe that ratio would be flipped at the University of Illinois. But
and
again,
you think that's the intersection of UW. That's just the intersection of UW and like the economy of Seattle.
Exactly, the economy of Seattle. These hometown strangers that you know they come to Seattle for work or business opportunities. They stay, and as Connie was fond of always saying, they embrace a give where they live sort of philosophy. So I think University of Illinois, because of its because of the strength of many of its programs, probably most notably the College of Engineering, it will attract a national and international constituency. But I think it's different when you're not sitting in a 5 million plus population center.
And so you did make it to that population center, had the opportunity to play a big role in the Be Boundless campaign, raising over $6 billion. And for the 6-year trailing period ending fiscal 22, $679 million a year, roughly, being raised with over 150,000 donors per year. Again, a scale that few people have had the opportunity to experience. Just tell me about that and reflections on that last stop before, as you said, retirement. I didn't know if I could share that news here. I didn't know how public it was, but
Yeah,
you said,
very public. Oh yeah, yeah. We've done the recruitment for my successor. Tamara Josserand has started July 1st, so we've been transitioning here the last month and a half or so, and university is going to be in good hands with her leadership. Yeah, I think reflecting, Brent, this is a team sport, and this is all about team. We raised that kind of money through the University of Washington because, with intentionality, we've built a high-performing constituency-based, major gift-centered fundraising enterprise, supported by a terrific group of central development programs, capably led by my partner and colleague, Lee Heck. And those unit chief advancement officers and their teams and Lee's central teams, they are highly collaborative. They do a great job. Really the credit, I'm probably a bit of a conductor leader, if you will, but the credit is really to them. I mean, they are, I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to be alongside of those that are in the seat today and those that, folks like Edgar Gonzalez and Tracy Ostrom and others who have moved on from the University of Washington, but where our paths touched. Just so grateful to have had the chance to partner with them and work alongside of them. They're terrific teams, and in this sort of full integrated advancement model where we focus with intentionality. And I tell people a lot, I cite the ever true funnel a lot about focusing our work on the marketing enterprise, building awareness, building engagement at scale through that marketing enterprise, leading to more significant engagement, which then leads to philanthropy and other forms of private support. So, it's funny. I started my career working with a guy who was building an integrated advancement program, right, at Washington State, and I'm finishing my career in what I would argue is one of the best integrated advancement programs in the country. So I feel pretty fortunate.
Yeah, I love the reference to the funnel, and I think the trick is the handoff from stage to stage. Recognizing that engagement and content is going to be in a bit of a silo, no matter how many times we do presentations about breaking down silos, and recognizing that prospect development is going to be in their own world and the front line is going to be out on the front lines. And especially at the scale you're operating, I think the trick is how do you create consistency and streamline that handoff such that it's not just a pretty slide,
No, I think that's true. and maybe adding a layer to what you just described, the rise of digital giving officers, or some, however they're, I mean, some people I've heard them called discovery officers, but I even think the discovery officer tends to have more of an out on the road kind of description to it. I believe we've learned during COVID that we can engage effectively with prospective donors in a remote environment like this. And the digital gift officer, to me, I mean, if I were going to be in this another 15 years and I was thinking about weighting investments, I mean, building the funnel, and you probably don't appreciate me calling it a funnel, but building that kind of framework and then building out the fundraising infrastructure a bit differently, probably with more reliance on the digital gift officer. I think I see that as part of the future.
Yeah, look, it's not only that we've learned, it's that the donors have learned and adjusted, right? And this is applying, I mean, we're not special snowflakes in advancement. It's changing the way that real estate deals are done. It's changing the way that wealth management is done. It's changing the way that luxury sales are done. You can buy a Tesla with Apple Pay on your iPhone right now. I mean, the world has changed a lot.
Well, my second daughter bought her home in without ever walking through it.
And that's not that unique.
It is not that atypical anymore, right?
And so why wouldn't we be comfortable making philanthropic decisions in a remote first context? And honestly, I think donors are way ahead of us. Like think of ourselves as donors. We are ahead of the industry. And there are times when I feel like we're making good strides in advocating for the DXO concept or the DGO concept. And then there are times when I sit here and I think, how are we even talking about this? It's 2022. What's the alternative? Getting on a plane and doing less than 100 visits a year for the cost of a frontline person plus travel and entertainment. I mean, how are we debating this?
And to your point, more importantly, what is our consumer, if you will? So it's following consumer behavior. What are they signaling to us that they want? I think they want our content. They want the ability to engage with us, and they want to engage with us on their timeline and in ways that matter to them. So, yeah, yeah.
About a month ago, Dan, you wrote a super thoughtful post on LinkedIn, and I would encourage everybody listening, follow Dan, connect with Dan, mention that you heard him on the podcast in your note, because he's really been thoughtful. I mean, there's still a lot of advancement leaders that are not public on LinkedIn, right? That aren't sharing a window into the universities they work with. I think that's a missed opportunity, but you've done that, you've embraced it, and you really wrote a very thoughtful post that in which you basically summarize what you call the 4 predictors of fundraising success, which was kind of a quick compilation of a variety of perspectives and lessons learned over the years. And I thought it would make sense to share them with our audience today. And I'll just take you through. I mean, unless you've got them right there in front of you, or if you'd want to just be able to rattle them off. Otherwise, I can reference your post. But what are the 4 predictors of fundraising success? And the first was a compelling case for support.
Yeah, a compelling case for support that reflects the institution's brand, its mission, and that advances the strategic priorities of the institution. I think that "and" is really important. I'm a proponent of moving away from donor-centric fundraising and moving to what I call a more values-aligned fundraising model. And so making sure that our case for support reflects the strategic direction and priorities of the institution. So we're introducing those early and often with prospective funders. It's great to have a case, but if you aren't thinking about how that case is communicated, articulated, moved out, and I'm not a marketing professional, Brent, so there's a lot of other people that know this work far better than I do. But what I do feel strongly about is that the case has to be communicated consistently, and I think increasingly through all forms of electronic channels. Um, and to the point, if we can get our influencers taking that case and pushing it out into their communities, then we've hit the spot.
Point two, committed leaders both internally and externally. And I would ask, what's harder, internal or external?
Um, I don't think one is harder than the other. They are different. With internal leadership, there I'm thinking of, your president, your provost, the deans, the athletic director, key faculty members. You know, the idea that those folks will invest their strategic focus around identifying what priorities there are, that they will commit resources to a robust advancement program relative to potential, and that they will commit the time that's necessary to engage with prospective donors, whether it's like this or in face-to-face settings. I'm hearing, by the way, that a lot of faculty members prefer this. It's more efficient for them, so they prefer this. They've leaned in during the pandemic in new significant ways. Externally, the time, talent, and treasure. That's what we're looking for, and hopefully, when I talk about external leadership, when we recruit for the foundation board, for instance, we ask folks to think about the UW Foundation being one of their top 3 philanthropic priorities during the period that they're going to be serving as board members. So, asking them to prioritize this, to make this important, and lean in with us in that time, treasure, and talent way.
Which leads to point 3, engaged stakeholders who are willing to invest.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Edgar Gonzalez over at Seattle U, because he uses the word champions. And I think that's a great way to describe this third predictor. We want champions. We want people that are going to stand up and sort of fight for that UW brand or that WSU brand or the Oregon State or the Illinois brand. That's what I mean by engaged stakeholders. And these are people that need, again, we need to diversify our donor community. We need to become more inclusive in our approach. So we need these champions to feel welcome. They need to feel like they are valued and supported and that they belong. That's the group that we've got to work through the ever true funnel type of model, and identify which of that constituency we're going to be targeting for philanthropic support. You mentioned early the 1 or 2% of the donors who drive 98, 99% of the support. That's the 80-20 sales rule on steroids. It's what we see here at the University of Washington. I guess what I would ask, Brent, is that the right definition of success going forward? Or do we have to step back and look at our fundraising model in a more inclusive manner and have different metrics?
You know how I feel about this. Everybody probably listening does, but I think it's another example where, it's frustrating that we even have to debate it, because in any other sector, the answer, it would be both. I mean, who's in your backyard? Microsoft. They have an incredible enterprise business.
Yep.
And they have an incredible SMB business, right? They didn't say, you know what, we're only going to serve the top 1 to 2% of Fortune 500 companies, and we're going to, only do $10 million contracts. That's a big part of what they do.
Right.
But they figured out a way to scale their work all the way down to the one-person business that needs a suite of services to get up and running. And I think that's, for whatever reason, we've been unable to allocate resources to, let's call it the mid-market and then the SMB in the way that the commercial sector has. even though there are clear examples where, from a lifetime value perspective, that is what gets the Phils of the world to eventually become the top 1 to 2%. And so, we're going to keep pushing that narrative as long as we can and proving it. And it is the kind of thing, I mean, that is a, presidential and board level discussion where we've just got to be able to make the case that it doesn't need to be either or, it's got to be both and.
Yeah.
And there's tremendous precedent from, wealth advisory, right? You've got the absolutely ultra high net worth category, and you've got the Smith Barney broker getting people started with their first IRA and everything in between. But there's a personal touch along the way.
Yep.
And it's that personal touch that oftentimes in fundraising, it doesn't start until somebody is named managing director. That's a missed opportunity.
Yep. Agreed.
Point 4 was the engine, the team, the culture, the resources, the systems and tools to enable the organization to capture its potential.
Yeah, I think you've summarized it there well. And I think the add-on I would give is design the engine around kind of the North Star of how does success look? And so it ties right back to this last quick dialogue we had. If you're going to define success solely around the 1% of the donors driving 99% of the support, well, you can design an advancement program to do that and probably spend far less money than we spend at UW on that and have a far more narrow focused effort. You will have good results for some period of time. I think you'll fall off a cliff at some point. But I think you want to be mindful in designing the engines to align with that North Star of what success should look like. And I think it needs to be that balanced approach that we're talking about. The other piece that I would say I would just share is the idea of having the right people on the team in the right seats doing the right work. Years ago from Stan and Connie, I learned the sort of axiom around the things we look for in hiring. We want to hire people with high integrity, who are bright, hardworking, and caring. That's been our mantra for the 40 years that I've been doing this work. And a CEO from Dreyer's Ice Cream said it this way. He said, "Hire smart or manage hard." And I thought that was a great axiom. I hung on to that. You make the right front end decisions, Brent. And again, it's why I'm so grateful to have finished my career with this high quality team at the University of Washington. A great team will take you to amazing places.
Well, that's a good segue as we conclude here today, Dan. Share some reflections. You're leaving the team in good hands. Tell me about the UW team. And you still are in the seat. And so are you hiring? Why should folks listening pay a little extra attention to the UW jobs page?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a search right now for a chief advancement officer for our College of Arts and Sciences. Our colleagues at Lindauer and Associates are helping us with that search. We will soon be posting for a new chief advancement officer for our #1 ranked School of Nursing. So we're looking forward to launching that search. Yeah, we're hiring, and like many of our peers, we've seen higher levels of attrition during COVID than we saw pre-COVID. But I know another campaign is on the horizon for the University of Washington. We've got great leadership in place in Mary Gresh as a senior vice president, and Tamara coming in now as the VP for development. Our foundation board is going through a revisioning process to get itself ready to best serve the institution. So there's just a lot of momentum right now at the university. And just today, the Seattle Times, I put up on LinkedIn a post about, you know, the academic quality of the institution. Again, another one of the significant rankings, number two or number three public in the U.S. So there's just a lot of momentum, a lot of good things that are happening. If you care about a better world, a place like the University of Washington as an advancement professional is a good place to look at, coming and making a difference and having an impact.
I love it, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and I'm glad we were able to sneak this in time prior to your retirement. For folks who want to be in touch, I've already suggested LinkedIn. Any recommendations? Is that the best channel?
Yeah, I put my personal Gmail account there, and I believe I stuck my cell phone there too. But yeah, would love to stay connected. I'm gonna wind down and not do a whole lot. I'm gonna think about being a grandfather and a father and a father for the next 6 months, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Well, I hope you enjoy that, and sounds like off to a good start with Edison's birthday today.
Yeah.
So I really look forward to being in touch, Dan. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And I would encourage everybody listening, reach out to Dan, and let's keep this community connection going. So with that, Brent signing off. Yeah, you bet. Brent signing off with today's guest, Dan Peterson from the University of Washington.